Hello students, this is the third lecture so far as the basic fundamentals are concerned. In the previous lecture, I told that I am going to give the steps of the programming, that is steps for the development of the software, but I feel I need to clarify some of the concepts before I can go ahead with those lectures. Today I'll be handling the CPU structure and certain other issues related to the CPU. As it is clear to you now that CPU stands for Central Processing Unit or microprocessor, and you should have known by now that it is a programmable device. Programmable device means that you can program this device by giving it the instructions and it will be performing those instructions. Now, who will write the program? You know that it is the programmer who writes the program. We have one more concept that's called as a software. Software is a set of programs. So software and programs are one and the same. But in case of software, we don't say write a software, we say develop a software. Who will develop a software? We call him as a software engineer or developer. Now let us look into the different components that make up the microprocessor. The microprocessor is made up of three important components. One is ALU, second is registers, and third is control and timing unit. ALU stands for arithmetic and logic unit. As I have made it clear that it is CPU that can execute the instructions. By executions, I mean that it can perform the tasks that are conveyed to it through that instruction. For example, if we give the arithmetic instruction to the processor to add two numbers, it will perform the calculation on the two numbers. Now, it might have seemed to you that the instructions are mainly of one type, that is data manipulation. By data manipulation, I mean calculations like addition, subtraction, multiplication. No, it is not like that. The instructions are of many types, and mostly every processor has three types of instructions that should be included in its instruction set. The instructions are data manipulation instructions, data transfer instructions, and program control instructions. Data manipulation instructions are those instructions where calculations are being done. Right now you remember it like that. It is more than that, of course. Then data transfer instructions are those instructions when you give such instructions to the CPU, it will transfer the data from memory to the CPU, or CPU to the memory, or from the device to the CPU, or from CPU to the device. So far as program control instructions are concerned, we will study them later. This is the main important point which you should remember for onward lectures, that instructions are not of one type. I have given the three broad classes of the instructions. that are available for the CPU, which it can execute. Once again I will name them: data manipulation instructions, data transfer instructions, and program control instructions. These instructions are available in the instruction set of the processor, and that instruction set is designed by the designer of the particular processor. Let us now understand the three components that are associated with the processor. I'll be mostly focusing on first two components, that is ALU and registers. With regards to control and timing unit, I will say little at this stage because you are not in a position to understand that. But I will give the main function of this unit, that is, it controls all the operations of the processor by generating the control signals. I will later on define what are control signals in the other lectures. And then the timing unit, because the name of unit is control and timing unit, it provides the clock to the processor. That is, each instruction takes a time to complete, and processor knows in advance how much time that instruction takes. And after executing that particular instruction, it goes for the next instruction. Because program is a set of instructions, and instructions are executed one by one, and once all the instructions are executed by the CPU, we say that program has been executed. Now let me first explain what are registers. If we go back into the block diagram, that this is the diagram of the CPU, which have already conveyed to you that it consists of three units: arithmetic logic unit, registers, and control and timing unit. I'll be first talking about registers, followed by ALU. Now, registers are memory locations inside the CPU. That is, these are memory locations that are present within the CPU. Now, why we have memory within the CPU, that we will understand in this lecture. These registers are given names as capital letters, like we have register A, B, register called IP or instruction pointer, that is also called program counter. Then we have got another register called as IR. These are the main registers I'll be handling in this lecture. Now there are certain registers which are given names like A, B, and C. As I have told you, registers are memory locations within the CPU. Why it needs those memory locations, I'll make it clear. Registers are of two types. One is special purpose and other is general purpose. Special purpose registers have specific function, whereas general purpose registers can be used for storing the results or operands for different arithmetic instructions or other purposes. But some registers have a specific purpose. They cannot be used for anything else other than that function. Today I'll be handling two registers out of special purpose registers. I have already named them. One is the instruction pointer, or another name of it is program counter. You remember this, it's a very important register, instruction pointer or program counter. The second is instruction register or IR. This is again a special purpose register that I'll be explaining in my lecture what is the purpose of this register. Now, as I told you, registers are memory locations. They hold binary numbers, and those numbers are nothing but the string of zeros and ones. Let us take a register A. Suppose it is a 8-bit register. It can store 8 bits. Here I have given in the diagram the structure of a register A. It stores 8 bits, and those 8 bits start from A0, A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7. The name of the register is A, but these are the different bits that are stored in a register. So this register stores 8 bits, that is, it is a 8-bit register, and name of this register in the Intel series is A, stands for accumulator. Again, this is a special purpose register. The registers like B, C, D, E, F, etc. can be taken as general purpose registers depending on the names given by the designer of the processor. Now, if we have a register A, that is a 8-bit register. I think I have made it clear. It is made up of 8 memory cells or flip-flops. What are cells or flip-flops? A cell stores a single bit that can be 0 or 1. Now if you see this register A, it has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cells, and each cell stores a binary bit or a digit that is 1 or 0. I think it is clear now. Next we come to the second unit, that is arithmetic and logic unit. As the name indicates, it stands for the unit that is able to perform arithmetic and logical operations. But it does more than that. This is the unit in which actually the data is manipulated, and the data manipulation instructions are associated with this unit, that is arithmetic logic unit. Data manipulation can be in the form of arithmetic operations or logical operations or comparison operations or shift operations. These are the 4 types of operations that are performed by ALU. These 4 operations are related with data manipulations or calculations or processing. ALU is actually the unit where the processing takes place. Therefore, in computer architecture, ALU is also called processing element. Now, the ALU can at most handle 2 operands or at a time. By operands, I mean numbers. Suppose ALU can add 2 numbers at a time. When you want to add the third number, you will have to add that number to the result. It can only perform the operations on 2 numbers. Now, ALU contains the circuits that can do addition or comparison or shifting or logical operations. These circuits, if you want to know about them, you will have to go through my lectures on digital electronics. And once you understand the structure of these circuits, you will form the sound basis in knowing the computer architecture. That is, the internal structure of ALU can be understood only once you have studied digital electronics. Now, I will discuss the 4 types of operations that are being done by the ALU. And these operations will be done by the ALU when the processor receives the instruction to do those operations. Once the processor receives the instruction to do those operations, it will convey to the ALU by giving a control signal that it should perform these operations. And who will give the control signal? the control signal will be given by control and timing unit. Right now you'll be having vague idea about this, but I'll make this clear in the later lectures. Now on the operations itself, we'll go ahead with the operations. The four types of operations that are supported by ALU are: first is the arithmetic operations. In the arithmetic operations, the ALU can do addition of the two numbers, or multiplication of the two numbers, or division of the two numbers, or subtraction of the two numbers. If the processor is 8-bit, it can handle addition of two 8-bit binary numbers, or multiplication or division or subtraction. Now, the types of results that are produced after the addition are numbers. What I mean by that? If you add two numbers, that is suppose 2 and 3, you get the result as the third number, that is 5. Similarly, if you do multiplication of the two numbers, the result is also a number. And if you do division of the two numbers, the result is again a number, so on and so forth. Arithmetic operations you have done in your schools and you have performed them in your life, so I will not explain it in detail, but I will explain the symbols. So far as C is concerned, addition in C is designated by plus, and the multiplication in C is designated by asterisk. Normally in mathematics we will use a different symbol for it, but in C you will use asterisk to designate multiplication. Why? If you see your computer keyboard, you will not find the symbol of the multiplication that you normally use in the mathematics. Similarly, you will not see the symbol for division. Division is indicated by a slash. Subtraction is indicated by the symbol that we use already. So addition and the subtraction have the same symbols as what we use in mathematics, but here for multiplication and division we have different symbols in C, that is asterisk, that is star, and a forward slash for division. This is important, and you should not confuse yourself with that, because these are the same operators as in mathematics. Their function is same, but their representation is different. Now the second type of operations that the ALU performs is a logical operation. What are the results of this operation? The logical operation, the results of this operation are in the form of bits. Logical operation is always performed on the two binary numbers, and the three basic logical operations I'll be handling here. There are more than that a processor can perform, but I'll be handling three basic logical operations: AND, OR, and NOT. Let us take an example of a single bit binary number to understand how the AND operation is performed. Let us take the example of two numbers A and B. Suppose A is a single bit number and B is a single bit number. Single bit number means it is a one bit number. Okay. Now, if the possible combinations of the values that are possible for A and B are 0, A is 0, B is 0, A can be 0, B can be 1, A can be 1 and B can be 0, and A can be 1 and B can be 1. If I perform the AND between A and B, what will be my result? The result will be like this. If both A and B are 1, then only the result is 1. And if any of them is 0, result will be 0. So for this combination, that is the first combination, when A is 0, B is 0, result will be 0 because both are zeros. If A is 0 and B is 1, result will be 0 because A is 0. If A is 1 and B is 0, result will be 0 because B is 0. Now when A is 1 and B is 1, the result will be 1. This is the only case where the AND operation produces a result of 1. This table is called a truth table or table of validity for AND operation. AND is same as multiplication, and it is also called as logical multiplication in digital electronics or mathematics. Let us see how. If I multiply 0 with 0, I get a 0. If I multiply 0 with 1, I get 0. If I multiply 1 with 0, I get a 0. Now if I multiply 1 with 1, I get a 1. I think I have made AND as clear. AND produces the result of 1 when both the bits are 1. And AND produces the result of 0 when both the numbers are, or one of the numbers is 0. Now in C, this is called as bitwise AND. Bitwise ANDs. But we have another form of AND available in C, that is called as a logical AND. Logical AND is performed between logical values, that is true and false. It is same as bitwise AND. The only difference is that bitwise AND operates on the bits and the logical AND operates on true and false. You can take false as 0 and you can take true as 1. So the result can be compared here, false and false. If A is false and B is false, the result will be false. If A is false and B is true, result will be false. And A is true and B is false, result will be false. And if A is true and B is true, result will be true. The observation in case of logical AND is that if one of the two operands is false, result will be false. The result will be true only when both are true. The bitwise AND is represented by single ampersand in C. The logical is represented by two ampersands in C. Bitwise AND is performed between the bits, but the logical AND is performed between the true and false values. I think this is clear. It is same, both are same, but the difference is that bitwise AND is performed on the bits and the logical AND is performed on truth values. We call true and false as truth values. Next, now if I have got two binary numbers. In the previous example, I have taken as single bit binary numbers, where A and B were only 1 bit binary numbers. Now let us take an example where A is a 4-bit number and B is also a 4-bit number. How do you perform the bitwise AND between A and B? The method is same, that you perform the AND between the 2 bits but corresponding bit of A with the corresponding bit of B. Then again, if this is the bit A0 of the A and this is a bit B0 of the B, and we see that both of them are 0, so AND will produce a result of 0. Now next bit is A1 and I AND it with the bit B1 of the B. The result is again a 0 because B1 is 0. Now this bit is called as A2 bit and this is called as B2 bit. If I perform AND between A2 and B2 bit, you will see that A2 bit is 0, so the result will be 0. Now if I perform the operation between A3 bit and B3 bit, since both the bits are 1, the result will be 1. The procedure is same, but here you perform the operations between the corresponding bits. This is a number A, which is a 4-bit number. The bit numbers start from A0 to A3. Then bit numbers for B start from B0 to B3. You do the AND of the corresponding bit. This is how you do bitwise AND of two numbers, that is A and B, which are 4-bit numbers. You can extend this argument to any n-bit number. Now you should remember this example, and the same example you can use for the next operation, that is OR operation. Now how is the OR operation performed? First, again, OR operation is two types in C. One is the bitwise OR and another is the logical OR. Bitwise OR is represented by a single line in the keyboard, standing line. We call it as a pipe operator. And then logical OR is represented by two pipe operators. As compared to the AND operation, if you remember, we had got a single ampersand and two ampersands. Now what is the logic of OR operation? It is again a operation that is performed between the two bits, and the result is 0 if both the bits are 0, and the result is 1 if one of the bits is 1. Opposite of AND, where the result was 1 when the both bits were 1, and result was 0 if any of the bits was 0. So this is the truth table of the OR operation. For logical OR, we'll be using truth values. Instead of 0 and 1, you have to use true and false. Now once we perform the OR operation between two numbers, that is A and B, let us see how we perform between the corresponding bits. We perform the operation of A0 with B0. Since both are 0, we get a result of 0. And when we perform the OR operation between A and B, we get a result of, oh, I have a mistake here. I should have printed the result as 1. So you correct this table. Here we should have 1 instead of 0. Now when we perform the OR between 0 and 1, we should get 1. And when we perform between again A3 and B3, we get as 1. I think it's clear. So OR produces the result of 1 when any of the two bits is 1, and it produces the result of 0 when the both bits are 0. I think this is clear. Now OR is always performed between the two operands. The two operands can be single bit or any n bit numbers. In case of single bit, it is like this table, but in case of n bits, when you are using n bit numbers, you have to perform the OR operation between the corresponding bits. Now we have got another operation called as complement operation. Complement operation does not use two operands, it uses one operand. That is, it performs the operation on a single number. Now what does it do? If the number is single bit, let us see what happens. If the number is 0, it will change it into 1, and if the number is 1, it will change it into 0. This is called as a complement. This is called as a complement. Okay. Now the same thing can be done for a logical NOT, but there you have the truth values. If A is false, it will convert by using a NOT operation on it. It will be converted to true, and if A is true, by performing a NOT operation on it, it will be converted to false. Now the symbol for the operations. For bitwise complement, we have a title character, and for logical NOT, we have to use exclamation symbol. Bitwise complement operation is performed on the bits, but the logical NOT is performed on the truth values, like logical OR and logical AND. I hope this is clear. Now next, as I told you that arithmetic and logic unit performs different types of operations. The first operation that we discussed was arithmetic operation, followed by the second type of operation that was called as a logical operation, and followed by now third one. This is called as a comparison operation. One more operation we will discuss is called as a shift operation. So the ALU is capable of performing four types of operations: arithmetic operations, logical operations, shift operations, and comparison operation. Even though the name is just a arithmetic and logical unit, which indicates that it can only perform arithmetic and logical operations. No, it is more than that. The two more operations that it can do is comparison operations and what we call as shift operations. Now let us explain what is comparison operations. In case of arithmetic operations, we have seen that when it is performed between the two numbers or two operands, you get the result as a number. In case of logical operations, you get the result in the form of 0 or 1. That is a single bit result. Now if you perform a comparison operations between two numbers, you will get result as true or false. you have been using these comparison operations in the mathematics. The different comparisons that are possible are greater than, less than, not equal to, greater than or equal to, then less than or equal to, and then equal to. What we are doing here, we are comparing the values of A and B, and if A is greater than B, the result will be true and it will be false if A is less than B. Let us see what are the different possible values. Suppose A is 2 and B is 4, then the result of this comparison will be false. And if A is 9 and B is 0, then 9 is definitely greater than 0, so result will be true. I have not written here, but the result is true. Now if A is 9 and B is 9, the result will be false. Why? Because A is equal to B, it is not greater than B. So the result of the comparison operations is always true or false. In comparison operations, we compare the two operands. ALU is capable of performing such comparisons between the two numbers. Okay. Now, if we have another comparison, that is X is less than Y, you can use the same logic and predict the results here as I have predicted in case of A is greater than B. I give it as an exercise to you. Now, if I say A is not equal to B, you have to again see what are the values of A and B. Then only we can predict the result. If A is 9 and B is 7, result is true. And if A is 0 and B is 0, in that case they are equal, but the result of this operation will be false. Accordingly, A is greater than or equal to B, you can predict, and A is less than or equal to B, or A is equal to B. This is important now, that ALU is capable of performing the comparisons. These operators are called as relational operators, that is greater than, less than, not equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and equal to. These are called as relational operators because you are trying to find the relation between A and B. Is A greater than B? Is A less than B? Or is there A not equal to B? Is A greater than or equal to B? Is A less than or equal to B? Is A equal to B? Now, I think I will explain this one also again. If A is greater than or equal to B, the result will be true if A is greater than B or if A is equal to B. So if A is 2 and B is 6, the result will be false because A is not greater than or equal to B, but it is less than B. If A is 9 and B is 9, the result will be true because you are checking for two conditions here. And if one of the conditions is true, then the result is true. Suppose A is 9 and B is 9, we say A is equal to B. So this condition is satisfied and we say the result of this operation is true. Then if A is 11 and B is 4, the result is again true because 11 is greater than 4. I hope I have made it clear that what are the comparison operations. In the comparison operations, we compare the two numbers and the result is true or false depending upon the values of those two numbers. If the value changes, the result will also change. When the A is 2 and B is 4, the result is false. But the moment the value of the A becomes 4 and B becomes 2, the result becomes true. So it depends on the values that A and B hold at a particular instance of time. Now, how do we represent these operations in C? Again, we have got different symbols for them. For greater than, we have the same symbol, and for less than, we have the same symbol. But for equality and greater than or equal to and less than or equal to and not equal to, we have different symbols. But the meaning is same. Why we have different symbols? Because you will see this symbol is not present in the keyboard, this symbol is not present in the keyboard, this symbol is not present in the keyboard, this symbol even though present on the keyboard, but this has got some other meaning in the C language. Therefore we have to use a different operator to convey this operation, that is equality operation. For this operation we will have a different symbol. What are the different symbols? That I'll be displaying later on and you will understand. But you remember that we have different symbols for these operations in C language. This operation uses two symbols in the C to designate an operation. Same, this operation uses two symbols, and this operation also uses two symbols, and this operation also uses two symbols. When I'll be taking the relational operators, at that time it will be clear. Now we have got the fourth operation that a ALU can perform. Recall the previous three operations were arithmetic operations, logical operations, relational operations or comparison operations, and now we have the shift operations. Shift operation is also performed on the single operand, that is, it performs its operations on one number, one binary number. Shifting means, suppose I have got a number A which is a 5 bit number starting from A0 to A4. Shift means you will be shifting its bits towards left. These are the memory cells that hold different values. Now once we will be shifting this bit, that is A3 bit into A4, A2 bit into A3, A1 bit into A2, and A0 bit into A1, this is called as a left shift. And if you will be doing the same thing in the reverse direction, that is, you will be shifting A1 into A0, A1 into A2 into A1, A3 into A2, and A4 into A3. This will be called as shifting towards the right. Now this is left shift and right shift. What are these blocks? These are memory cells that hold the values. Now when you will be shifting towards left, the important situation is when you will be shifting towards left or right. When you shift towards the left, what will happen with this bit? This bit is overwritten by this bit, that is 0 will be written on this, and 1 will be overwritten on this, and 0 of A1 will be overwritten on A2, and 0 of A0 will be overwritten on this. So they will be shifted one position towards the left. If you see, this diagram shows that this is shifted here, this is shifted here, this is shifted here, and this is shifted here. Now what happens with this bit? This bit is overwritten. This bit is overwritten. Now what should be placed here? There are two scenarios. Either you place the same bit here at two places, here as well as here, or you paired it with some different bit. But right now you can, for simplicity, understand this, that in shifting operation, the bits are either shifted towards the left or towards the right, one bit or more than one bit. This is a simple shift operation I am taking, where bits are shifted one position towards the left. And this operation is also important operation so far as data manipulation is concerned. So we have got four types of data manipulation operations that are performed by the ALU. One is arithmetic operation, second is the logical operation, third is the what you call comparison operation, and fourth is the shift operations. Now after making you understand what are the different operations performed by the ALU, now let us understand now how does the CPU execute a program. For CPU to execute its program, the necessary condition is that the program should be present in the memory. And let me give some concepts related to the memory that will be helpful for you in understanding the programming. What is a memory? Memory is a storage device that can store data or instructions. That is important. Now, is memory an input device or output device? The answer is that it is both input and output device. You can send data, that is not you, it is a CPU that can send data to the memory, or it can get data from the memory. If you see keyboard, it can only send the data to the system. So we call it as an input device. If you see the monitor, it can receive the data from the system. It cannot send the data to the system. So it is the output device. But in case of memory, it is both input and output device. You should remember it. Now again, we don't have memories of one type present in computer. We have got memories that use different technologies. We have memories that are based on electronic technologies. These are called as electronic or semiconductor memories. We have got memories that are based on magnetic principles. We call such as magnetic memories. Then we have got memories that are based on optical technologies. We call them as optical memories. In electronic memories, we have RAM and ROM. In magnetic memories, we have memories like hard disk, floppy disk, magnetic tape, magnetic drum. In optical memories, we have memories like CDs. But once I say that the program should be present in the memory so that CPU can execute it, I am talking about semiconductor memories or electronic memories. That is, the program should be present in the semiconductor or electronic memories. Why it is so? Because there's a reason for it. Let me come to the reason later. Let me first tell you what are the different types of electronic memories, and I will not go into details of it. I'll just give basic points. We have got two types of electronic or semiconductor memories. One is RAM and one is ROM. By saying that the program should be present in the memory so that CPU can execute it, it means that the program should be present in RAM or ROM. RAM stands for random access memory and ROM stands for read-only memory. Then there are different types of ROM. I will not go into details of that right now. Now, the chief difference between RAM and ROM is when you switch off the power, the contents of RAM are lost, but the contents of ROM are not lost. So RAM is said to be volatile memory. We call it as a volatile memory. Why volatile? Because it loses its contents once the power is switched off. But ROM is a non-volatile memory. It does not lose its contents once the power is switched off. Both RAM and ROM have their own importance in the system. I will not go into that, but RAM and ROM are both among the type of memories called as electronic memories or semiconductor memories. Now, each memory device has its own speed. Electronic memories have fast speed. Magnetic memories are slower memories because they are based on mechanical principles, and so are the optical memories. Why the program should be present in RAM? The reason is that CPU is a fast device and it needs the data at a good speed, fast speed. You cannot make the CPU wait for a second, because for 1 second for CPU means a lot. Why? It can execute billions of instructions in a second, or trillions of instructions in a second, or millions of instructions in a second. Million means a lot of instruction. That means millions of calculations in a second. And if you make it wait for 1 second, that means you are delaying million tasks that could have been done by the CPU. So, electronic memories are fast. Magnetic memories are slow, and so are the optical memories. Why? Because they are mechanical memories. That is why our programs should be present in RAM or ROM so that CPU can access them quickly without waiting. These memories are much faster than magnetic and optical memories because they are based on electronic principles. Now, what is a memory? This is important. Again, this concept is very important so far as programming is concerned and so far as computer architecture is concerned. Memory, as I told you, it is a device for storing that data and instructions. Let us see what is actually a memory. Memory is a set of locations. Each location can store a data or an instruction. Let us understand this with the example of this diagram where I have shown memory organization. We can say this is a location 0, this is a location 1, this is the location 2, this is the location 3, this is the location 4, and this is the location 5, and so on and so forth up to location n. What I mean by this is that each location is actually a hardware, and it can store a binary number. That number can represent a data or instruction. What is stored in the memory is called as the contents of memory. if you see this location, that is location 0, it holds the instruction, for example, multiply a comma b, and location 1 holds the number 5, location 2 holds the instruction add a comma b. These are basically stored in binary form, but memory is actually a hardware device that stores data and instructions. It is a set of locations. Each location is 8-bit in size. By 8-bit means it can store 8 bits. It is made up of 8 memory cells, as I have showed in a register, because registers are also memories. When we say memory register, we mean the location of a memory. When we say simply a register, we mean the memory of a processor. This you should remember. Now, as I told you, memory is a set of locations, and each location has got now an address. So location is associated with two things. One is the address. The location, the address of this location is 0. The address of this location is 1. The address of this location is 2. The locations are addressed in a serial fashion. That is, the addresses start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up to n. There is the limit to the number of memory locations that can be connected to the CPU. This is important. You cannot simply connect as much memory to the CPU as desired. There's a limit to it. What is the answer of this question? That you can get only in computer architecture. I will not take that right now. But my important point is that memory is a set of location. Each location is called as a memory register. Memory register. That memory register can hold an instruction or data in a binary form. Each memory location has got an address. Two memory locations cannot have same address. Each location has got a unique address, so that processor knows from where it has to get what. If the two locations have the same address and I ask the processor to get the instruction or data from location 0, but if the two locations have the address 0, it will be the problem for a processor where from to get that value. So each location has a unique address. The addresses are numbers. They start from 0 to n. So memory location can be accessed by using the address. If I say what is at the address 1, in this case it's 5. If I say what is at the address 2, you say it is add a comma b. This is the address, 2 is the address, and add a comma b is the contents. Now each memory has a size. Each memory location has a size. It is an industry standard. It is 8-bit. So location is a 8-bit. Now, what are the different operations that can be performed on a memory? The different operations that can be performed on the memory is that you can either store a number in a memory or an instruction in a memory, or you can read that number from the memory. So there are basically two operations on the memory. One is called as a read and another is called as a write. Suppose I have got a location 3. I want to store some number there. So I write that number in that location. And if I want to know what is in the location 1, I read that. Who reads actually? I don't read. It is a processor who reads it. And I don't write. It's a processor who writes on the memory. The read and write operations are performed by the processor. And these are the two main operations that can be performed on the memory. That is read operation, memory read, and memory write. This is regards the operations that can be performed on the memory. Very important. One is read and one is write. And who will perform these operations? That is the CPU. There are so many things that I cannot tell you right now. But the main important things that I'm telling is that each memory is a set of locations. Each location has a unique address. What is stored in a location we call as the contents of the location. On the location we can perform two operations. One is read and one is write. And how many items can a location hold? Only one item. Suppose in the location 1 I have an item called 5. That is the number 5 is stored. If I want to store another number in it, the previous contents will be overwritten. Suppose I want to write the 6 in it. The previous 5 will be lost. So how many items can a memory location hold at a point of time? It is only one item that it can hold. I think it's clear now. What is a memory? Memory is a storage device. It contains a set of location. Each location has a unique address. Each location has a fixed size, that is 8 bits. The operations that can be performed on a location are read and write, and each location can hold a one item. Next, now I come to my main topic, that is how. Right now I told you that it is CPU who executes the program. It is the component that executes the program, that's a microprocessor. And through the instructions of the program, the programmer instructs the CPU what it has to do. Now CPU is capable of understanding those instructions. This is important. Now let us see how the CPU executes a program. Let us suppose I have a program here. Now program is to be stored in a memory. This is actually the diagram where I have stored a program, example program. The program need not to be necessarily start from location 0. It can start at any location. I have started it from location 5, and that program has got 1, 2, 3 and 4 instruction. It is a 4 instruction program. Once the CPU finishes the execution of the 4 instructions, we say that program is executed. This program should be actually present in the binary form, but I have written it in a symbolic form so that you understand it. Now who will execute this program? It is a CPU that will execute this program. This is my CPU. Now how can it execute the program? It has to get the instruction into the processor. Where will it store the instruction? It will store that instruction in a register. So the instruction is first got from the memory. Now the important question is, where is the instruction stored? How does the processor know that the instruction is stored at location 5? This is again the responsibility of a programmer or operating system to store that address in the instruction pointer initially or program counter. So the program counter or instruction pointer points to the instruction or address of the instruction that is to be executed by the CPU. Now initially when I have to execute this program, my example program, the address of the first instruction is 5. This 5 I need to store here in the instruction pointer or program counter. Very important concept. The address of the first instruction of the program is at the start of the execution stored in instruction pointer or program counter. This is a special purpose register, which I told you earlier. What are registers? Registers are memory location. So what does this memory location contain? It contains the address of the first location when you begin with the execution of the program. Is this clear? Next, once this instruction is brought into the memory, that means you have to read the instruction from the memory. Who has to read? CPU has to read the instruction from the memory and then get it into it's one of the registers. What is the register where you store this instruction? You cannot store the instruction in here. The register for that is instruction register. So what is the instruction register? It is again a register or a memory location within the CPU that stores the instruction that is to be executed. The instruction that is to be executed I will call as the current instruction. My current instruction is add a comma b, and this instruction is to be executed by the CPU. The address of this instruction that is stored in a program counter or instruction pointer, and once this address is stored in a program counter, the CPU knows that the first instruction of the program is stored at this address. It will get the instruction from that address and store it in the instruction register. Now what is the next step? CPU has to execute this instruction. There are actually 3 phases involved in the execution of the instruction. First phase is called as fetch phase, second phase is called as decode phase, and the third phase is called as execute phase. Once all these 3 phases are over, the instruction is executed, and after that the CPU can perform the next instruction or execute the next instruction. It fetches that instruction, again decodes that instruction and executes that instruction. What do you mean by fetch? What do you mean by decode? And what do you mean by execute? Fetching means getting or reading the instruction and storing it in the instruction register. From where to fetch, that address is given in the instruction pointer. Once the instruction is fetched, it is decoded or understood. Who understands this? That is understood by the control unit. And then once the control unit understands the instruction, it executes the instruction. Let us see what happens in this case. The first instruction that the CPU will get in my example is add a comma b. It will get this instruction and store it in the instruction register. It knows that it has to get it from address 5. That address 5 is stored in the instruction pointer. Now once it gets this instruction from this address, it decodes this instruction. The decoding is done by control and timing unit, and by decoding it knows it has to add A and B. What are A and B? These are the registers that hold two different numbers. One number is in A and one number is in B. Then it sends these numbers to the ALU, and the ALU adds A and B, and then the result is stored, say suppose in the A itself. So once this is done, this instruction is executed. Two numbers have been added and the results have been stored in A. Once this instruction is executed, what to do next? Next you get the instruction 2. Where from you get the address of this instruction? You know the address of the first instruction. You increment that with 1. Then you get the next instruction, store it in the instruction register. That means you have fetched the instruction, decode the instruction, understand the instruction, execute the instruction, and then go for the next instruction. Again increment the previous address with the 1 and get the next instruction from that address, so on and so forth till all the instructions have been executed by the CPU. Once the CPU executes all the instruction, the program is said to be executed. I hope in this lecture I have made you understand how the CPU executes the program. The CPU executes the program by fetching the instructions one by one, decoding each instruction and executing it, then fetching the next instruction and decoding it and executing it. Once again I told you, by decode we mean understand, and that understanding circuitry is present in the control unit. That understanding circuitry is present in the control unit, the main unit that controls all the operations. Right now you remember that it controls the operations by generating the control signals. Control signals are generated with reference to the time. That is, we call this unit as control and timing unit. In up to this point, I simply used to say to you that the program is executed by the CPU. Today I told you that it is the RAM or ROM where the program is stored once it is to be executed by the CPU. I have given the reasons for that. Now mostly it is RAM. It can be in the ROM also, but mostly it is a RAM. And I have introduced two special purpose registers. One is called as an instruction pointer or program counter, and another is called as instruction register. When you get the instruction of the program that is to be executed, that is stored in the CPU, and the location where it is stored is called as an instruction register, and the address of the instruction which is to be fetched from the memory and is to be executed, that is stored in the instruction pointer. Instruction pointer always points to the current instruction that is to be executed, and once that instruction is executed, it is incremented so that the processor can fetch the next instruction. This is how actually the program is executed. I hope you have understood today's lecture. I am thankful to you for being patient with me.